I call this meeting to order.
37 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry and Technology. Pursuant to order of reference of Wednesday, June 1st, 2022, the committee is meeting to study Bill C-235, an act respecting the building of a green economy in the prairies. La rencontre d'aujourd'hui se déroule sous format hybride.
Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House of Order. People are participating through Zoom. You know the rules. Without further ado, I'm very pleased to welcome today the witnesses who are taking the time to testify before the committee on this important bill. So I will begin with the Honourable Amarjeet Sohi, a former colleague. I'm pleased to see you. He is now the Mayor of the City of Edmonton and appearing by video conference.
Justin Ness, President and Chief Operating Officer of Safety First, here in person with us in Ottawa. Thank you for being here. We have from the Alberta Enterprise Group, Catherine Brownlee, President, who will be joining us at 4:30. So we'll interrupt the question period and hear from Mrs. Brownlee. We have from the Bioindustrial Innovation Canada, Megan Seagrave, Executive Director. From Fairness Alberta, Bill Bewick, Executive Director via video conference. And from the Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities, Raymond Orb. So thanks to all for being here. Considering we have a lot of witnesses, we'll start without further ado avec Monsieur Sohi. Donc la parole est à vous, Monsieur le Maire.
We'll begin with Mr. Sohi. The floor is yours. 5 minutes.
And I believe you're on mute.
Here we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
All right, just give me 1 second here. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Amarjeet Sohi, and I'm the Mayor of the City of Edmonton, Alberta. Like many major cities in Canada, Edmonton is growing quickly, and we are feeling the effects of climate change crisis. It is our responsibility to work together towards solutions and create action plans accordingly. This is why I'm very excited to see the introduction of this bill, C-235, by the Honourable Jim Carr. City of Edmonton supports the approach of local cooperation and engagement outlined in the bill, and looks forward to being an active participant in the development of the framework. Municipalities are not specifically mentioned in Clause 2, but we should be at the table as partners in this work. Prairie region is very vulnerable to the impact of climate change. Over the last 20 years, insured costs of climate hazards in Alberta have been increasing. Since the 1990s, Alberta has experienced 6 out of the 10 biggest climate hazard insured losses in Canada. Prairie region is warming at the fastest rate in Canada outside of the Arctic region. This brings a higher risk of flooding, a higher risk of drought, and a higher frequency of extreme heat events. Prairie cities will need to become more climate and energy resilient, and we need to collaborate with all sectors and orders of government to transition together. This transition will be a huge driver for economic job creation and economic growth. The framework developed through the implementation of Bill C-235 will help prairie cities to proactively plan, collaborate, and advance on employment and economic priorities that are intended to mitigate and minimize disruptions from climate change. This work is happening at both the local and regional level, and there are many opportunities such as regional public transit programs that can be built into this work. I will give you a few examples how the proposed federal framework aligns with Edmonton's strategic plans and what we have already accomplished. Edmonton's Economic Action Plan sets the path of creating more jobs and more businesses, and is purposefully designed to steer us toward opportunities in the green economy. Edmonton's Community Energy Transition Strategy and Action Plan facilitates the growth of local green economic sectors, including renewable energy, green transit and construction, carbon capture and storage, and smart technology. Since 2015, this strategy has already led to the City of Edmonton being on target to have 100% of renewable electricity for its civic operations in the next few years. Deployment of 60 electric buses, piloting 2 of hydrogen buses, and plans to deploy several hundred of low-emission buses in the next decade. And development of district energy systems in the downtown and Blatchford community. Collaboration with partners like the FCM and province of Alberta has resulted in Edmonton being the first large city in Alberta to have initiated a clean energy improvement program. Currently, 3 other Alberta municipalities have initiated their own CEIP program, and 19 Alberta municipalities have passed clean energy improvement bylaws in preparation to start their programs. As you can see, Edmonton and many prairie cities want to transition to a green economy. We are ready for this and need your help to be successful. Another example is the role of partnership in the great work being carried out due to the federal government's Climate Innovation Fund, which has supported essential capacity building to better prepare Edmonton's real estate, building, and construction industries to transition to green economy. And last year, the last city plan that I want to highlight, which aligns with the proposed framework, is Climate Resilient Edmonton, Adaptation Strategy and Action Plan, which was approved in 2020 and is Edmonton's approach to adapting to the impacts of a changing climate. One of the first priorities being undertaken is the development and implementation of our flood mitigation plan, a $1.6 billion investment plan that includes a combination of homeowner program, drainage systems improvements, green infrastructure, and smarter stormwater networks that will allow Edmonton to anticipate and react to storms in real time. Alberta will be home to some of the largest net zero petrochemical manufacturing facilities in the world because of provincial carbon offset framework, along with geological conditions that optimize for carbon capture and sequestration. One of the world's first net zero hydrogen facility will be located here in Edmonton by 2024. I would be remiss not to advocate for policies that recognize decarbonization opportunities that align with strengths of my region's economy. Becoming a carbon capture and hydrogen leader in the prairies is not a given specifically due to recent incentives of the Inflation Reduction Act that are creating more favorable conditions for those projects to be in the US. Canada can do more to increase the competitiveness of our hydrogen sector while increasing sustainable economic growth. Prairie cities like Edmonton are ready to partner with anyone that will help us to build a new and inclusive economy. We're willing partners committed to being at the table, ready to work together. We will be involved in several different federal ministries, and framework will allow us to that singular focus and a point of access that will build efficiencies and allow us to address these challenges faster. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sohi. We'll now turn to Justine Ness. So the floor is yours.
On the Standing Committee for Industry and Technology. For the purpose of context, I would like to provide you with a brief background. I am the President and Chief Operating Officer of an oilfield service company established in 1996, a second-generation family-owned company. I also come from a farming family, and we have 2 beautiful daughters that are 4th generation on the family farm. The oil and gas sector, as well as farming, has been the heart and soul of not only our family, but as also a majority of Albertans, Saskatchewans, and Manitobans. My business works closely with Canada's world-class energy sector and is proud to do so. As President and COO of a business that helps industry improve areas of reasonable quality and safety, I can attest to the high standards already enforced in Canada's oil and gas industry. Yet we have our Canadian government who fails to support our industry, which is not allowing us to succeed to our fullest potential. We choose to ship oil across our oceans and to support countries like Saudi Arabia. According to International Merchants and Trade database, Canada imports from Saudi Arabia approximately $1.5 billion in 2020 and 3.5 million metric tons in 2021. Saudi Arabia does not ethically produce oil and has little to no human rights, with no regards to the environment. Where in Canada we have created a safety industry around the care and protection of our industry leading workers. Let's first look to our own industry and support our own country, support our own citizens and our own economy. Every day we see innovations brought forward by Canadian energy producers and just how important they are to the economic and social fabric of Western Canada. Hardworking men and women focus on delivering the world's safest, ethical, sourced, and environmentally friendly petroleum products. It is deeply important that we recognize the power that people have to invoke change in our society and understand that we all have the vastly different experiences. This is what makes Canada great. Canada produces less than 1.5% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. Of that, Canada's oil industry produces about 0.3% of all greenhouse gas emissions. Let me be clear. My family and I have a great love for the outdoors and a great aspiration for a clean environment. It is very important that we protect it. I care about the decisions that are being made by the Canadian government, but by adding red tape and buying fossil fuels from countries that do not take the same environmental protections as we do, we are supporting unsafe and environmentally damaging practices. Bill C-235, in its own form, I fear, will effectively harm the resource industry even further in Canada and rob the world of the energy securities it so desperately needs. These policies have also had a frightening disability on a Western democracy in Europe, making them vulnerable to Russia. We will still need oil and gas for the foreseeable future. With the invasion of Ukraine and holding Europe as hostage to Russian energy, it has become clear that the world needs more clean, green Canadian energy. We need to be self-sustainable and be able to rely on our own resources and our own infrastructure. We do not want to fall victim to energy insecurities the same way Europe has. Canada has low-cost green energy solutions to prevent the current energy crisis. Alberta and our Western neighbours have been doing the greening of the economy already. We have solar and wind farms, carbon capture trunk lines, produces the cleanest oil and gas in the world. We have the largest coal reserves in the world for the making of clean, efficient coal gasification in making of syngas. Entrepreneurs and provinces do not need federal interference on how to run our industry. We all want the best for our environment and generations to come, but drowning us and this generation and futures in inflation and red tape is not how we prosper and promote innovation in our economic success. Bill C-235, again, is another step by our government to kill an industry that would be needed well into the future, whether you want to hear that or not. Wind energy and solar and electric cars still depend on fossil fuels. Canadian entrepreneurs are the best equipped to solve these problems. Not only does this bill fail to recognize the leaders in this field, but do nothing but hold those innovations back. So I will leave you with this. We are shipping oil across our oceans when it is unnecessary, considering the abundance of our own resources. We are shipping 500,000 barrels a day up the St. Lawrence River to Quebec refineries, instead of using pipelines and building more pipelines that are far more superior for the environment. So I ask you, why are we continuing to fixate on the West? I strongly believe that if this government truly understood our resources and how they are being produced in the West, you will have a different outlook. I encourage you and I invite you to come and understand the truth about Canadian energy. Bill C-235 seems to be a classic federal overreach, trying to dictate and influence these three Western provinces. In simple terms, the federal government needs to step back. We are already a leader. We need to start promoting it. We need to start educating the people on the importance of our world-class industry. So let's start recognizing and supporting the world's greenest, safest, ethically produced oil right here in Canada.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Madam Ness. We'll now move to Megan Seagrave, Industrial Innovation Canada. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur Chair. Thank you to the committee for the invitation to speak today. My name is Megan Seagrave, and I'm the Executive Director of Bioindustrial Innovation Canada, also known as BIC. Before going any further, I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from the traditional unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Wolastoqey, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy peoples here in New Brunswick. Happy to speak to you about Bill C-235. BIC supports this bill as it complements our existing work as a not-for-profit national business accelerator focused on supporting developers of clean, green, and sustainable technologies here in Canada. BIC is leading Canada's circular economy development as the only business accelerator in Canada focused on providing critical strategic investment advice, services to those businesses and developers in the green and sustainable space. BIC has a long track record of success in identifying and supporting early stage clean tech and clean energy companies by focusing on helping them overcome hurdles to commercialization, allowing them to remain and grow here in Canada. BIC has been involved with companies in various sectors from battery recovery to resource recycling to the identification and growth of value chains for the country's agriculture and forestry biomasses. To date, BIC has invested in 32 early stage companies and fostered its own investment fund. In the process, our portfolio companies have created over 5,200 jobs, leveraged an additional $350 million in third-party investments, and we're on track to document greenhouse gas reductions of over 13 megatons by 2030. We understand that reaching Canada's net zero targets will take a nationwide effort and concrete initiatives. The proposed framework that promotes economic sustainability and growth and employment in the prairies aligns well with BIC's current mission to identify, support, and grow sustainable business opportunities across the country. The prairies have an abundant and sustainable biomass resource, which are foundational not only to Canada's food and protein production, but also provide the building blocks in terms of starches, fibers, and oils, which are critical to the production of bio-based products. Bill C-235 has the potential to catalyze those opportunities, particularly those rooted in resource and industrial sectors. By ensuring improved alignment between stakeholders, this bill will further enable the region's green transition, focusing on the role of agriculture in the new prairie economy, as well as Canada's largest emerging circular economy. This bill will support the building of value chains that connect Canada's agriculture and forestry biomass to the advanced manufacturing of biochemicals, biomaterials, and biofuels used across a multitude of industries, providing alternatives for greener application in Canada's automotive, aerospace, construction, and energy sectors, successfully stimulating a green economy while helping Canada move towards its net zero targets. In summary, supporting this bill will effectively support organizations like BIC by way of programs and products that support early stage businesses by helping them innovate and overcome commercialization hurdles. Decarbonizing Canada's economy is a long-term objective, and BIC wants to ensure that all regions get to benefit from a green economy, especially regions like the prairie provinces. With considerable promise to help Canada move towards its net zero targets, this bill will help the prairies attract additional investment and business opportunities while creating the jobs of the future for the region. Thank you for your time.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Seagrave. Je passerai maintenant.
Thank you, Ms. Seagrave. Now turn the floor to Bill Buick for 5 minutes.
Thank you, everyone on the committee, for the invitation to appear. It really is an honor to be here to share our perspective on this proposed bill concerning greening the prairie economy. I'd like to start with Fairness Alberta's motto. We're proudly Canadian and fiercely Albertan. We're a group of Canadians who believe Albertans have not been treated fairly by federal economic and fiscal policies. And we believe by respectfully but assertively raising awareness across Canada about the basic facts on these policies, we can persuade a majority to support meaningful reforms. On the economic side, environmental policies around energy are by far the biggest pressure point. Many in Alberta even say that federal policies are so consistently damaging to our natural resource development, and thus our long-term prosperity, that we'd be better off separating. But our members believe that there are millions of fair-minded Canadians that just need to hear clear, positive, fact-based messages to understand the legitimate frustration in the West and join our call for policies that truly balance the environment and the economy. These policies should also respect provincial jurisdiction over natural resources. With Russia's invasion of Ukraine exacerbating inflation pressures and making energy security a topic at the kitchen table, we think this is a critical time to shift opinions about Canada's role as a significant, safe, and sustainable world energy supplier. The bill under consideration has some laudable intentions, and certainly there are green initiatives that are praiseworthy, such as the potential for federal involvement to stimulate a east-west electrical grid to move Manitoba hydropower to the west. Certainly carbon capture and hydrogen plants are happening, and that's great. But the bill misses the mark in some important ways. The red tape the bill would create is one concern, but the bigger one is the focus on transitioning workers away from oil and gas development. Existing federal policies that are in development and are already in place are, if anything, overly focused on emissions reductions, insofar as the aggressive layers upon layers of taxes and regulations are clearly at the expense of the long-term prosperity of Canadians. Having the ministry devote more resources to new reports on greening our economy at the expense of growing our ability to increase responsible global energy security is entirely misdirected. The biggest red flag in this whole bill is Clause 3B, which calls for job retraining in regions that rely on traditional energy industries to enable them to build a zero-emissions green economy. Instead of training workers out of the traditional energy sector, we should be adding more of these valuable workers to expand production. They're also needed for building hydrogen plants and carbon capture systems. The world needs our energy. We can be leaders in climate change mitigation while also expanding jobs in this vital industry. Fairness Alberta recently launched what we call the Unjust Transition Campaign to raise awareness and highlight just how unjust it is to transition away from Canada's oil and gas production. Oil production is expected to climb and then hold steady or slightly decline for the next 30 years. Europe has classified natural gas as a green energy since it is so much cleaner than the coal it displaces, and it's also vital to supplement intermittent renewables like wind and solar. Natural gas production is going to rise over the next 30 years, and we're currently the fourth largest producer. As I laid out in a Toronto Sun column in September, if we aren't supplying oil and gas, it's just sending more sales, investment, and revenue to Russia, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and another dozen dictatorships. 12 of the top 15 national reserves in oil and gas are rated not free. Why would we step back and let them thrive? LNG is the obvious place we need to expand. We have an LNG graphic we use in our campaign pointing east to energy security for Europe and west to slashing coal emissions in Asia. The moral imperative is clear that we have dropped this ball, and for the sake of energy security and the environment, we need to pick it up and make up for lost time, not retrain its workers. With the shifting global scene, Canadians are likewise shifting their opinion on LNG. 60% of Quebecers recently polled agreed Canada should pursue LNG export. That means more workers, not less. New investment in oil and gas brings prosperity and opportunity, in particular to Indigenous communities. It does it better than any other present option. And true Indigenous partnerships are now the norm in any new investments in the sector. So these investments are going to create good-paying jobs in many communities across the prairies and massive revenues to all orders of government. There's obviously one big reason the federal government suddenly has a surplus, and it's oil and gas. And the last we heard, there's a lot of eastern provinces that really enjoy the large transfer payments that come from the productive parts of the country, like Alberta. As we've pointed out before, Albertans sent a next $600 billion more to Ottawa in the last 60 years than was spent back in Alberta. This golden goose can't be sacrificed without economic pain across Canada. The bill's biggest flaw then is in calling on the industry ministry to focus on reporting how they plan to retrain traditional energy workers. It's insulting to Albertans and completely at odds with what Canada should do to help the world, namely supply more of its energy to reduce global emissions as well as reduce the dependency of nations on petro-dictators. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to the question period.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bewick. We'll now move to Mr. Orb from the Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Ray Orb, and I'm the president of the Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities, known as SARM. And I was born, raised, and I live in a rural community of Cupar, northeast of Regina, which has a population of about 625 people. I'd like to thank the Standing Committee on Industry and Technology for the opportunity to share our association's thoughts as it studies this bill as an act respecting the building of a green economy in the prairies. Our membership is made up of Saskatchewan's rural municipal governments, and SARM has been the voice of rural Saskatchewan for over 100 years. Today, I'll share the perspective of those we represent by sharing our thoughts on how the bill being proposed would impact our livelihoods in rural Saskatchewan. SARM has considered the proposed legislation and does not support it. Upon review, we determined it will not further the best interests of rural Saskatchewan. The bill proposes a consultation framework be built to facilitate the building of a green economy across all prairie provinces, and it assumes the interests of all those residing in these provinces to be the same, and that simply isn't going to work. Issues facing rural Saskatchewan are unique to us. Rural Saskatchewan's economic success and livelihood is a reality because of the uniquely rich and vast landscape it houses. It boasts a wealth of access to some of the most arable land for growing food and resource-rich lands that house critical natural reserves that the world needs. It has allowed agriculture, mining, and energy sectors to flourish, sectors that could not flourish in an urban setting or equally in all prairie provinces. They need access to rural Saskatchewan's unique land base. When rural Saskatchewan has a problem or requires federal or provincial collaboration, we would like to work with government directly. We don't want to be trapped in a bureaucratic framework that attempts to treat everyone the same. Some of our unique issues include making sure our key sectors aren't stifled by trade agreements, taxes, and world politics, while also ensuring access to efficient rail, road, and broadband and cellular infrastructure. Issues like those facing rural Saskatchewan are not shared necessarily by those living in Calgary, Winnipeg, or even Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. In rural Saskatchewan, we are making excellent headway on our own solutions for a greener economy and don't require a federal framework. Saskatchewan has some of the greenest agriculture producers in the world. Most Saskatchewan cropland is zero-till. That means that our producers use a low-disturbance direct seeding system. Not only does zero-till agriculture sink more carbon, but it also reduces soil erosion and the amount of fuel required on farms. The Saskatchewan Soil Conservation Association has been studying carbon sequestration for years. Through its research, they found that Saskatchewan producers sequester 9.64 million new tons of carbon dioxide every year, over 28 million acres. Our province has announced its own target for renewable energy use in 2015 and set it at 50% by 2030. To help accelerate this target, SARM partnered with the First Nations Power Authority to provide a tool to help our municipalities and First Nations navigate the site selection process for renewable energy projects. As you can clearly see, rural Saskatchewan has unique issues and is already implementing unique solutions. So SARM is opposed to this bill. In essence, this new legislation would try to implement a one-size-fits-all framework that is not going to work. And in closing, on behalf of Saskatchewan's RMs and rural Saskatchewan, I thank the Standing Committee again for the opportunity and look forward to continued dialogue and the questions period upcoming. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Orb, and thanks to all of our witnesses. We'll start the discussion with MP Stubbs. Welcome back to the committee. The floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to all of the witnesses for being here today. Justine, thanks for setting the record straight on oil and gas and on Alberta. And I just want to thank you for being here also on behalf of your family and your various businesses. I hope that you get the chance to deliver more of your messages to combat these myths about both Alberta and about the Canadian energy sector, of which we have much to be proud. Mr. Orb, I entirely agree with your point about the uniqueness of our provinces, but as a rural MP, I'm quite confident to say that you've certainly summarized what I would expect to be the universal, overwhelming and majority view of elected rural representatives right across the province of Alberta. So time being what it is, I will focus my questions with Dr. Buick. Thank you for being here today to participate. I've got to say, it's pretty wild to hear a former Liberal minister supporting another former Liberal minister's initiative 7 years into an existing government about the importance of consulting with prairie provinces while talking about initiatives that, of course, have already all happened without the need for this one-size-fits-all Ottawa knows best bureaucratic framework. But Dr. Buick, I agree entirely with the point that you made that this bill is fundamentally insulting to Albertans. So I wonder if you might want to expand on issues around fracturing national unity and Western alienation, which have been a consequence of this government's anti-energy legislation and regulation. If you want to share some thoughts in that context about this bill, and also if you have anything else to say about Alberta and Canadian oil and gas being leaders in environmental stewardship.
Sure, thank you. I do think I get the sense the bill is trying to ensure that the West gets its share of spending and attention in the decarbonization efforts, but the direction of the spending is problematic. When we hear retraining workers, and when anybody hears that, whether it's the cod fisheries or the various sectors in the past, that basically means the government is saying, we're going to regulate your company or industry out of business, but we'll retrain some of your workers and hopefully they'll be okay. Prairie communities know this will hurt them, and it shouldn't be in this bill. Whether, look at the cod fishers in Newfoundland or even coal workers in Alberta right now, you can't just retrain people to just jump into new jobs that will last for 20 years. If you announced you're going to retrain auto workers in Ontario or dairy farmers in Quebec, the response, you wouldn't get a thank you in response. You would get a panic. So as I've explained, the world really needs our valuable resources more than ever. But in addition to the direction being misguided because it's trying to transition away from this super valuable resource that the world needs more than ever, it sort of intrudes on our provincial management of resources. So it's not just that the federal policies are misguided, it's that there really shouldn't be the ones making some of these decisions. Our Constitution makes it clear that the provinces have the jurisdiction over their resources, and these policies are severely impacting our ability to develop them. Provinces recently unanimously joined a challenge of C69, and the carbon tax was hotly contested in the courts by many provinces. And so, there's I did a political philosophy PhD, and there's a sort of famous change that happened in the Enlightenment when Thomas Hobbes came in and said the government's role is to keep you safe, and you should obey it as long as it's keeping you safe. And then John Locke came in and said, well, unless the government's taking your property and making it so you can't make a living, that's also grounds for speaking up and demanding better. And so this isn't just a difference of opinion on a political issue. It's a clear attempt to throttle the largest economic sector in the prairies, and that will impoverish us in particular, but it's going to impoverish all of Canada. And so we just have to stop talking about transitioning away from oil and gas and start talking about the opportunities for oil and gas to provide immense prosperity for Canadians, help with energy security, and help our European allies get out from under the thumb of Vladimir Putin and other Middle East dictators. And if you really care about the environment, the single greatest thing Canada can do to reduce emissions is get LNG flowing in copious amounts off our west coast so that China isn't producing all these coal plants that they're building. Because China's announced new coal that will double the oil sands emissions. They announced that in 2020, just their new coal. If they were doing LNG instead of that, it would be 50% less emissions and a much less in other things that are emitted by coal. But in particular, the emissions would be reduced 50%. That would save the entire oil sands if we could replace their coal with our LNG. So this just seems like it's obvious to a lot of Western Canadians. It's becoming more obvious, as I said, 60% of Quebecers agree we should be doing LNG. And so this whole notion that we should be transitioning away from gas is wrong, and it's offensive, and it is leading to people wanting to say, if we can't even produce our resources, why should we be in this country? And we're trying to prevent that, but it is an understandable sentiment, and people need to take it seriously.
Yes, it's a bit like talking to a brick wall repeatedly. Dr. Buick, you have focused on Clause 3B, but I wonder if you have any thoughts on any other clauses, or if you think there are other priorities that the bill could have or should have addressed instead.
Unfortunately, Mr. Buick, we're out of time, so it's a very pertinent question, but hopefully you'll get some more time in another round to answer that very important question. So we'll now move to MP Erskine Smith for 6 minutes.
Thanks very much. I actually want to continue with Mr. Buick. I was big into political philosophy as well, more John Rawls than John Locke, but I appreciate the reference. And I wonder, I want to start with, I think, an area of common ground, because I actually really appreciate, I think, yourself and the testimony from Safety First also emphasized that a barrel of Canadian oil is unquestionably better from a social perspective and an environmental perspective than a barrel of oil from Saudi Arabia. As a liberal in Toronto, I think that's exceedingly obvious, and I would agree. I wonder if I could get your agreement on something else, that while there are opportunities in the short term, certainly with respect to displacing, say, unethical oil elsewhere, that when we look at the longer term challenge, there are companies from FedEx to Shell that are making net zero commitments by 2050. And I wonder if you would agree that the world needs to get to net zero by 2050. And that's for Mr. Buick, yeah.
Hi. There's the oil sands companies have said they will get to net zero by 2050. So I think there's a lot of places where net zero could make sense, but net zero is extreme. Wait, pause. So yeah. The energy sector, the companies that have committed to net zero by 2050, you would think that is an extreme commitment by those companies? It's a very ambitious commitment, but I think with something like the oil sands, given the opportunities they have to sequester and put in the infrastructure that could be required to achieve that, I believe them that it's attainable. But to expect a net zero economy overall is it's extremely ambitious and will no doubt be extremely expensive.
But let's pause there, because I think you're right. It's ambitious. I would also say it's ambitious but necessary. But let me read. I'm no expert, so let me read from the International Energy Agency and their net zero report. They say changes in energy consumption result in a significant decline in fossil fuel tax revenues. So that's a challenge on the government side. But worse, on the production side, annual per capita income from oil and natural gas in producer economies, that's us, falls by about 75% from $1,800 USD in recent years to $450 USD by the 2030s, which could have knock-on societal effects. Structural reforms and new sources of revenue are needed, even though these are unlikely to compensate fully for the drop in oil and gas income. While traditional supply activities decline, the expertise of the oil and natural gas industry fits well with technologies such as hydrogen, carbon capture, utilization and storage, and offshore wind that are needed to tackle emissions in sectors where reductions are likely to be most challenging. With or without us, demand is going to significantly change. Let me tell you, in their analysis, coal demand declines by 90% in 2050, oil demand declines by 75%, and natural gas declines by 55%. Now, if I care about jobs, the workers that you care about too, I care about fairness for the workers in Alberta unquestionably, and I really appreciate the advocacy of my colleague Shannon Stubbs on this front. But what I worry about is that we look at a short-term perspective, but when we look at the long-term perspective, that there is going to be a transition with or without us, and we care about jobs and workers. Why wouldn't we want to look at a green energy economy, a green innovation economy, a green economy overall, and say, how do we best support workers going forward, not just in the short term, but the long term?
I have never heard reduction estimates for 2050 on that scale.
Well, that's not me. That's the International Energy Agency.
The International Energy Agency says it will plateau at about 100 million barrels a day for the next 30 years. Oil is going to decrease slightly depending how aggressive people are with new technology.
This is not, by the way, no, this is what I've just read to you is the International Energy Agency's net zero report. So the very oil companies that you're saying we're holding up as a standard, and they're great Canadian companies who I think absolutely have much higher ethical and sustainable values than regimes around the world, unquestionably so. I agree with you there. But the very companies that have committed to net zero, we now have International Energy Agency that said, here's our net zero report and here's our analysis for net zero. And these are their numbers. So if we take these numbers seriously on
those are their numbers if people pursued net zero around the world.
Well,
the world isn't doing that.
But that's the core question. Look,
while we throttle our sectors.
Sorry, Mr. Bowick. If you don't agree with net zero, then you and I are not going to come together on this, and you're going to disagree with the bill, and I'm going to say the bill is maybe a good idea, and Mr. Sohi is going to say we need support for a net zero economy, and Megan Seagrave is going to say we believe in a net zero economy, and there are jobs here, and we're going to create jobs for a net zero economy. It sounds to me like you've just said initially it's ambitious, but I believe in it, but now you don't believe in it. So, okay, so Ms. Seagrave, I want to move to you. Ms. Seagrave, you believe in a net zero economy. Are there jobs in a net zero economy?
Do I not have a chance to answer that?
Yeah, Mr. Smith, I'll just let Mr. Bewick, because I'll give you 30 seconds to respond, and then we'll go to Madame Seagrave, and that's going to be it.
While we go back and forth raising cost immensely and reducing our production and reducing our international clout, China and other countries are laughing at us, and they have no intention to pursue this. So if you don't want to be the ones that are producing the energy that the developing world needs to get to our level of standard of living, then we don't agree. You're right.
Yeah, well, it's a disagreement around net zero. Like, you functionally don't believe in a net zero by 2050 economy, and I do, and that's like,
for the world.
That's a fair.
That's laughable for the world. Yes,
that's the answer I wanted. Thanks very much. And Ms. Seagrave, do you believe in this in a net zero economy by 2050?
I do.
Me too. Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, MP Erskine Smith. Je passerai maintenant la parole à Monsieur Lemire pour.
Mr. Lemire, you now have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is for Mr. Bewick. You referred to the independent feelings of Albertans. What would that result in if Alberta voted 100% favor of these treaties of taxes and reinvested, take all its taxes and reinvested? What would your society look like if that were to happen?
I'm sorry, I missed the very beginning part of the translation there.
Very first.
Taxes?
You said you referred to the independent feelings of Albertans. How would you build a society then if it were independent? What would be the priorities?
We are a proudly Canadian organization, but I'm merely sharing the sentiment that is real here in Alberta, and so I'm not going to speculate on what a sovereign Alberta would look like.
Do you feel that there is frustration in the fact that decisions are made based on the greater region of Toronto rather than on rural regions?
There is certainly the case that Alberta is underrepresented in the House of Commons, and it is difficult to have only 11% of the seats, but sometimes far more than 11% of the. We're expected to bear much more than 11% of the cost for some of these national initiatives. Yes, that's very frustrating.
Et si vous étiez
And if you were a member of the government, what would you do to ensure that Alberta's economic development would be carried out the way you see it should be done?
It would be pursuing more efficient and greener oil and gas, because that's the valuable commodity that the entire world is clamoring for, and we should be the ones producing it, and we are producing it more efficiently every year. The emissions per barrel has dropped 20% in the oil sands in the last decade, and they are now talking about net zero and putting carbon capture and coming up with green sources of energy inputs. That's all great, and that should be supported, but we should stop talking about shutting the industry down and transitioning away from it, because the world needs it for the next 30 years.
Vous faites référence à du pétrole vert, Madame Ness.
You talked about green oil. Ms. Ness referred to it as well. It seems to me that oil is oil, and technically it always produces carbon, no?
It depends how you burn it, but yes.
Voulez-vous ajouter un complément?
Do you wish to add anything?
No. Okay.
Okay. But the oil sands, when you look at other ways of extracting oil, is the most costly and the most polluting procedure that we have. Why would you call this green oil?
It's not the highest polluting. But it is one of the more emission intensive by a fraction. And it's also currently on its path to net zero. So I think that should be something people should support more of, because I guarantee the producers in Russia and Saudi Arabia care nothing about net zero production.
J'encourage évidemment.
I would encourage any type of research that leads to a better energy transition to be done, and ensure that we're going to be able to green our aspirations on the ecological front. You referred to Ukraine. If we wanted to use Alberta oil better and send it to Ukraine, we can't do it through current pipelines. How long would it take to build the pipeline and processing plans to liquefy this and send it to the European countries? Are we talking about 15 years approximately?
No, I've heard 5 or 6 at most, and if you did it from the from the existing pipes that are near the Maritimes, it could be the U.S. is building liquefaction plants in about 12 months.
Et est-ce que vous pensez que la guerre en Ukraine va être encore?
Do you think that the Ukraine war will still be around in 5 years?
I hope it's not around in 12 months, but the fact is that Europe will still be in dire need. They're building LNG reception plants right now because they know that's the future they need, both as a cleaner source than coal and to help make their variable, intermittent, renewable sources more reliable. Gas is great because you can turn it right on as soon as the wind dies or the sun goes down, and that's why they've called it a green energy.
Vous avez mentionné que 60%.
You said that 60% of Quebecers supported LNG resources. What is your source here? And are you surprised by the fact that Quebecers have a government where the CAQ has rejected the LNG project in Quebec, and it was elected with 70% of the seats? So that does mean that this environmental measure will be supported by Quebecers.
I think the platform of the CAQ was much broader than just that, so I'm assuming they got elected for many different reasons, and it's always dangerous to put one specific platform commitment as the reason for support. I do hope that they take a hard look at the possibilities Canada can have in both humanitarianly helping the world and environmentally helping the world, and realize that Quebec could be a major player with its own natural gas reserves, and it could create a lot of jobs and prosperity for Quebec.
Merci pour la sincérité de vos réponses.
Thank you for your sincere answers.
Je passerai la parole à
Thank you, Mr. Lemire.
Well, thank you. I'm going to turn to Mr. Sohi. It's good to see you again, Mr. Sohi. I think the last time I saw you before committee was in Natural Resources, and Ms. Stubbs was there too, so it's a bit like old times. And I thank you for bringing up the topic of climate adaptation. We've just, of course, had a series of serious weather events in Canada. Hurricane Fiona hitting the Atlantic provinces with damages that will probably end up in the billion-dollar range or more. We had a massive derecho thunderstorm tracked from Windsor to Quebec City in the spring that again caused similar amounts of damages. And of course, I'm from British Columbia, where we had just a horrific summer last year with a heat dome that killed over 600 people, fires that destroyed towns, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a brand new report out recently from the Canadian Climate Institute that really goes into depth on the financial impact of climate change on Canada. And just in the short term, in 2025, they're predicting that we'll add $25 billion of extra costs to the Canadian economy, and that would rise to $100 billion annually by 2050. So it all comes down to we have to get serious about climate adaptation. We're living this right now, and you mentioned what Edmonton is doing, and I'm just wondering if you could perhaps expand on what the city of Edmonton is doing and what kind of help they're getting from other levels of government, because right now I think the federal government is being woefully inadequate funding in terms of climate adaptation to help communities like yours and smaller communities like the ones mentioned in Saskatchewan.
Yeah. Well, first of all, nice to see you all. I really appreciate your question because not only we are going to lose our GDP because of the impact of climate change, but also there's an added pressure on local governments to pay for the adaptation cost of increased flooding, for example. Our city will need close to $1.6 billion additional resources to upgrade the drainage and stormwater infrastructure over the next number of years. I think I believe that federal government is serious about being net zero by 2050, but I also believe that federal government will not be able to achieve that if municipal governments are not seen as partners. Because that's where the emissions are. Emissions are in municipalities. 30% of a city's emissions are in transportation. Another 20% are in buildings. So if we are not greening municipal infrastructure, if we are not helping convert old buildings into better better efficient buildings by retrofitting those buildings to be more energy efficient, federal government will never meet that target. We can talk all about it, but I think it's very important that federal government sees municipalities as equal partners and work directly with us in implementing some of those choices and strategies that will help reduce emissions and create jobs. I'll give you an example. We have a very ambitious plan of retrofitting homes, commercial buildings, industrial buildings. But we need close to $100 million of annual investment in order to do that and facilitate investment from the private sector and public sector. But we cannot do that on our own. So that's why it is important that Clause 2 includes municipalities as partners, that we are given better tools in order to achieve those targets.
Well, thank you. And you also were talking about, transit investments. You mentioned buses. I just wonder if you could perhaps expand on the bus story.
Yeah.
Are those buses being made, for instance, by New Flyer in Winnipeg, or are they? And what sort of jobs are they creating there, and what sort of impact will they have in cities across Canada?
So we were able to convert we have close to 700 buses, and we converted about 60 of them into electric buses with the support from the federal government. But we have a long way to go. And they are new flyer buses. Some are manufactured in Canada, some are manufactured in the US. We are currently testing 2 hydrogen buses that are made by New Flyer, but unfortunately they are built in the US. But if we are able to transition and do it quickly, we were talking to New Flyer when they were here last week, that they will start manufacturing those buses right here in Edmonton. Right here in Canada, in their existing plants, which are local jobs. And retrofit jobs are local jobs as well, as people, these are jobs for, plumbers, these are jobs for insulation inspections and roofers and everything else, installing solar panels. All this. These are all local jobs that we can create by investing in local economy and greening our infrastructure and helping us achieve those targets.
And how are you?
Mr. Cannings, I'm sorry, that's all the time.
Thank you, Mr.
Sohi. Up. So we'll now, actually, before going to the second round of questions, we have the pleasure of having Madame Catherine Brownlee from Alberta Enterprise Group, who just joined us in committee. So welcome. I will cede the floor to you for 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and then we'll return to questions.
Thank you. Just to confirm, everyone can hear me? Very good. Thank you. Greetings, I'm Catherine Brownlee. I was raised on a farm in central Alberta, guided by parents who strive to ensure safety for their children, while instilling the belief that serving and supporting others would contribute to a strong economy and grow a robust community. As a member of Alberta Enterprise Group for more than 6 years and now president of AAG, I can attest that my parents' philosophy and traditional mindset holds true today. As the leader of AAG, I wish to introduce, demonstrate, and underscore the efforts and successes that we as a collective entity, combined with Alberta as a whole, have accomplished locally and on the world stage. I am proud to state that AAG members employ more than 150,000 Albertans and generate billions in economic activity each year. We, the AAG, formed in 2007 when a group of business leaders banded together to create an ambitious new business advocacy organization striving to make Alberta a better place to live and do business while generating prosperity for all Albertans. We inform public and policy makers on complex and challenging issues facing the province and the country by stimulating and guiding the business climate and subsequently perpetuating real and necessary changes, the value of which benefits the entire nation and the globe. As a province, Alberta is on the leading edge of some of the most influential and beneficial programs designed to minimize the grave effects of climate change while restoring confidence to local and global markets and primarily to Albertans. For example, over the past 3 years, Alberta has invested over $1 billion from the Technology Innovation and Emissions Reduction Fund to support clean technology development and innovation. Alberta is on course to fully transition away from coal-powered electricity by the end of 2023, 7 years ahead of the federal target. In fact, as of January 1st, 2020, the Alberta Emissions Offset System has enabled oil and gas operators to voluntarily switch to low or zero emitting devices, which will result in reductions of almost 2 megatons CO2 equivalent. Advocating for issues that significantly impact the current and future economic climate of our province is a challenge that few have embraced. As a small trading jurisdiction, but geographically in the heart of the matter, Alberta must persevere as active players on the national and international stage. The best way to maintain our competitive position is to build bridges to new markets, to welcome those who wanting to invest, and to be active and present wherever Alberta's interests are in play. An example is the Baseline Reduction Opportunity Assessment Program, which provides $10 million in funding to support small and medium-sized oil and gas operators to conduct detailed assessments of methane reduction opportunities and fugitive emissions. As a result of technological innovation, Alberta's oil sands producers have reduced emissions per barrel by 36% since 2000, 22% over the past decade, with leading producers on track to another 16 to 23% cost reduction over the next 10 years. New methane regulations set a target to reduce emissions by 45% by 2025. AEG has delivered the Alberta business story to thousands of influencers and decision makers at all levels of government. Our outreach missions to Washington, Ottawa, Montreal, Switzerland continue to broadcast the value of Alberta business to the world. With this comes education and sound leadership. Regarding inactive and orphaned sites, Alberta established the Site Rehab Program using $1 billion of federal COVID-19 funds designed specifically to reduce insolvencies within the oil field service sector while generating employment to a broad scale of professionals. This past spring and summer, Alberta made major adjustments to the levies and new policies on mandatory close targets. As an organization, AEG has an extensive track record of promoting the province as an investment destination, telling the Alberta story, and building networks of support for increased economic development and cooperation. We remain on the front of all matters of business and economy for Alberta. We are clearly Alberta's most powerful and fully engaged business network. As I hope I've outlined to this committee, Alberta businesses are on the cutting edge of technological innovation, emissions reduction, and green innovation. Given that Alberta is already a leader in this field, it does cause to wonder, as business leaders, what the positive impact of another Ottawa-based framework as proposed in this bill would be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Brownlee. We'll now move to MP Steinley for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here. Set aside for a second the fact that this bill is an Ottawa knows best approach to a blanket solution to 3 very different provinces that they are calling the prairies and lumping everyone in together. One thing that I want to ask is, when the sponsor of the bill was here at committee a while ago, he was asked, Mr. Carr was asked, did he consult with any provincial governments, municipal governments, before he put this bill forward? So my question would be to the President of SARM, Mr. Orb, good to see you. Did you have any consultations with the federal government before this bill was brought forward to the committee and brought to the House of Commons?
No, Mr. Steinley. Thanks for the question. We didn't have any contact with Mr. Carr, and I can say that I've met Mr. Carr on several occasions, and I have a lot of respect for Mr. Carr, but he did not consult with us on this bill.
So from the opposition's point of view, that's a very big concern. First and foremost is the fact that what this bill is going to do in affect the Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, no one in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba was consulted before this bill was brought forward, which is very alarming. A second point I'd like to make is my friend from the block was talking about oil is oil. And I'd love to hear Justine Ness's comment on that, because I don't believe oil is oil. I believe Canadian oil is more ethically produced, more environmentally friendly produced, and I believe our oil is better for our Canadian people because it actually then gets that money back into our economy. So I'd like to have a comment from Justine about oil is oil.
Thank you. I absolutely agree. Supporting our local economy, our Canadian economy, over sourcing it from outside, trucking it in, shipping it in, is obviously the much better choice in keeping our local industry thriving as opposed to sourcing it from outside. So I do believe that it is a cleaner source to provide it within and support our own country as opposed to bringing it from across the seas.
Thank you very much, and I couldn't agree more. I think if you would follow the environmental footprint of oil that's brought from Saudi Arabia or Russia or other jurisdictions into Canada, I think that environmental footprint and carbon footprint would far outpace anything that's done in Saskatchewan with good Canadian environmental standards. Plus, our workers are treated much better, and we'll always stand up for the hardworking men and women in the oil and gas sector. As a conservative, that's something we are very proud of. And now I want to go back to the conversation between my friend Nathaniel Erskine-Smith and Mr. Bill Buick. I think that's an interesting conversation where you could really look at an Easterner and a Westerner's point of view. And I'd like to have Mr. Buick finish his conversation about the fact that net zero is a very ambitious goal in Canada. But what does that mean if all other jurisdictions, some of the bigger polluting jurisdictions like India, China, Russia, right now America, are not having the same focus on net zero as Canada. So sometimes aren't we just cutting off our nose to spite our face?
Yeah, I understand the value of being a world leader, but if nobody's following, then you're imposing all these costs on yourself while none of your competitors and none of the much larger emission countries are doing much about it. I noticed the US has decided they are definitely not doing a carbon tax. So that should send a message to us about whether that's the right way to go for Canada. But as you said, Asia, and it's not necessarily sinister. They legitimately have billion people in China and a billion people in India. Hundreds of millions of those people are trying to have a better life that includes some of the things we take for granted. They just want a kind of middle class existence like us, and that takes energy. And right now, there's no alternative to them that is adequate, and there's nothing that's as efficient and effective as oil and gas. So the one they're turning to is coal. So that's not exactly the solution that we would all be looking for, I don't think. And instead, we should be being the foremost provider of those energy sources for them. And keeping in mind, it's good to lead by a little bit, but once you lead too far out, you're basically leading a parade by yourself. And I think we need to take a dose of reality and keep our ambitions and our goals and our targets something in line with what the big countries in the world are doing.
Thank you very much. Yes, sometimes one-car parades are very, very lonely situations, and I think that's where this federal government is at this point. And I just end with this, the fact that Canadians want to have Canadian oil in their vehicles. They want to have that environmentally friendly oil that actually helps our hardworking men and women in the oil and gas sector. Also, Mr. Orb hit on the fact that our Canadian agriculture is the most environmentally friendly in the country as well. And one thing that's very disappointing in this bill is they mention a bunch of different ministers, and they don't mention the agriculture ministers from Saskatchewan, Alberta, or Manitoba in this piece of legislation. And that was a very big disappointment for me when I saw it, because I think agriculture should always be at the forefront when we're talking about Western Canada, Manitoba, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, and it was totally missed in this bill. So those are some of the reasons why I just don't think we can let this bill proceed, and it's not going to actually reach the targets and make the country greener at all. It's just going to hurt us in the long run.
Thank you, Mr. Steinley. We'll turn back to Mr. Erskine-Smith for 5 minutes.
Thanks very much. And I want to get back to this idea of an energy transition, because this is not a partisan issue. This is, and I'm going to read from the Alberta Geological Survey as part of the Alberta Energy Regulator. This is on their website. The energy transition requires substantial quantities of critical minerals, and their supply emerges as a, sorry, let me restart that. They say critical minerals are the minerals essential for sustainable economic success, economic security, the energy transition, and a reliable resource supply chain. So when they are referencing the energy transition, I wonder if we could start with safety first and Ms. Ness. What is the Alberta Geological Survey speaking to when they're speaking to the energy transition?
I would assume we're all trying to find the most green solutions to move forward, because everybody's worried about climate change, and rightfully so. However, we have to make sure that it is reasonable, and having those transitions is a great initiative, but it is proceeding at a pace that is,
But pause, because there's no timeline in this bill, right? This bill is specifically speaking to say we need to support the prairies in the course of this energy transition that, by the way, the Alberta Geological Survey and the Alberta Energy Regulator are themselves identifying. I want to go to the Alberta Enterprise Group and Ms. Brownlee. Do you support this bill?
No, we do not support it.
And specifically, what about this bill is and if you could reference the specific section, what section of the bill do you disagree with?
Just the entire thing. I actually see that it's just a framework to create yet another layer of bureaucracy. I actually don't.
What bureaucracy though? Because and I want to get to this because Mr. Buick talked about red tape too, and so the government's going to create a framework, and the framework's going to require consultation with the relevant provinces. What red tape and bureaucracy does that create for a business? Because this is presumably creating a framework for government policy action. So what bureaucracy is this going to create? And point me to the section again for a business in Alberta.
That's still directed at me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so specifically, it's all about how we're creating yet another layer of reporting. So that red tape that you're referring to, I agree. I think that's exactly what this is. We're already doing all of these great things in Alberta. I've already referenced them in my 5 minutes, and we've constantly been doing that. My first job in oil and gas was in environmental sales. So that was 30 years ago. We've been doing this all along.
Can I ask, so if this was business reporting, then I can understand that there's an imposition and obligation on business. This is the minister reporting to Parliament. What red tape does that create for a business?
For sure, the minister would need to receive something from all businesses to have that reporting. So for sure, it always starts with the business. We are going to have to report yet another layer of information, the red tape that you referred to.
Well, there's no obligation on business though. So anyway, so I guess if you could point to, and you can follow up in writing, like I'm very interested in the specific section because we're here to amend the bill and improve the bill, or decline the bill if there are particular sections that are so problematic they can't be improved. But if you could follow up in writing with the specific sections that you're challenged by. I want to, with the final minute I've got, by the way, Mr. Orb, I really appreciated your comment about zero till because while I'm an urban MP, when I met my wife 18 years ago, she's from Kamlaki, Ontario, and I would take the train to visit her. And my father-in-law still lives on the family farm that's been in the family since 1834. And I met a farmer on the train who told me all about no-till farming 18 years ago, and I had something to talk to my father-in-law about after that train ride. But I want to ask you, when you say it's sort of a one-size-fits-all approach, if we were to amend the bill to include municipalities as part of the consultation process, as Mr. Sohi has suggested we do, I think that sounds eminently reasonable. Why wouldn't you foresee an ultimate approach that would say we consult with municipalities, both small and large, and here's our framework, and the framework would have a section for smaller municipalities and a section for larger municipalities, and why couldn't the framework accommodate many different approaches depending upon the sector and depending upon the size municipality?
Well, just to make it clear, and I appreciate the question, just to make it clear, SARM represents rural municipalities in Saskatchewan, but we also have a mandate in agriculture. And so I think, the idea is, would be always a good idea to consult with people ahead of time. And in this case, agriculture needs to be consulted as well. And I think the point was made. We did notice as well that the Minister of Agriculture wasn't included in the I think it was like the preamble of the bill, and that raises a concern.
We'll fix that. We'll fix that, Mr. Urban. I really appreciate that feedback.
That's a concern.
I also think, by the way, Saskatchewan, and I say this as someone who cares about the future of food, you guys are going to be a superpower in the future of food and impulses and everything else. So I appreciate the work that you do, and thanks very much for your time.
We actually are already. I think we are a superpower. That's true.
Thank you. Monsieur Lemire, 2 minutes 30.
Mr. Lemire, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Ms. Seagrave. In 2009, Stephen Harper said that he would put an end to the fossil fuel grant and assistance to oil sector has, however, increased. In your opinion, how do you think that the oil sector would do without this subsidy? And how will this have an impact on a real transition, in your opinion?
Thank you so much for the question. We've been collectively subsidizing the oil sector for decades. Maybe to get a little bit drilled down into the point that I think you're trying to make. This bill to me is not. It's not about defunding oil and gas. This is about prioritizing clean energy and green tech, and about competitiveness for Canada. So there's a consensus that seems to be across the board here with regards to not only the questions that are coming from the members of Parliament, but also from the witnesses. Canada needs to remain competitive with other jurisdictions in all sectors, including oil and gas. And this bill is helping to lay a bit of a foundation to do that, because we're missing the boat. If we look at what's happening in the US with regards to the Inflation Reduction Act, the climate smart commodities investments, the bioeconomy, global competitiveness investments, we're losing ground. So I think that, you know, back to your question, this isn't about defunding oil and gas or taking away subsidies to that sector. It's about helping increase our competitiveness moving forward.
Merci.
Thank you. Mr. Carr came last September, and he affirmed that the framework for this bill wasn't just could be an example for other regions aside from the prairies. Do you think that Canada should come up with a cooperative framework like this in other regions as well?
I think all regions need to move towards net zero. And as an MP for the region of Quebec, Quebec is probably the next logical choice for developing a framework similar to this.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Lemire. Monsieur Cannings, pour 2 minutes 30.
Mr. Cannings, you have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. I'll stay with Ms. Seagrave. And you mentioned in your opening remarks about how many jobs companies you've been involved with had created. I think it was 5,200 you mentioned. That's obviously a small fraction of the sort of clean tech, green jobs in Canada. Do you have any idea how big that clean tech sector is in Canada and what the projections are for job growth there?
That's actually a great question. And with Stats Canada has had a hard time mobilizing the numbers around exactly what clean tech entails, because all sectors and all industries are actually doing clean tech in some way, shape, or form. And that goes back to adaptation and adoption of technologies to help reduce things like water use, energy consumption, you name it. With regards to the 5,200 jobs that the companies that we've invested in have created, those are all HQPs, so highly qualified professionals. These are individuals with a multitude of university degrees in engineering, science, business, you name it. So if, without knowing the exact numbers of jobs that are represented by the quote-unquote clean tech sector in Canada, I would say it's significant and only going to be growing moving forward.
So you would say, you know, we talk about this transition. Mr. Erskine-Smith referenced remarks from the Alberta Energy Regulator about the transition that's happening. You have groups like Iron and Earth that are very concerned about jobs that are presently in the oil and gas sector that are, you know, those workers see those jobs disappearing and want to be retrained and find new jobs. And yet we have a clean tech sector, from what I understand. You know, I've heard various numbers from 80,000 to 100,000 to whatever. That is certainly its size is on par with the oil and gas sector, and it's growing. And what I see, what I would hope a framework like we're talking about today would try to develop that sector and provide those jobs, and provide them now, because this is when workers need them. And I'm just wondering if you could comment on that whole growth.
I think something to mention is building out the green economy and green jobs in the clean tech sector. Whether it's in the prairies, whether it's across the country, it doesn't mean an end to the oil and gas sector. Oil and gas is here for a very long time to come, and it plays an important role in the push to net zero, and it's a vital part of Canada's economy. So I agree with a lot of the comments that have been made by the witnesses. That said, we are already moving towards green, and renewables. And as you said, those are where the jobs are going to be going. Couple of, the automotive sector was mentioned just a little bit by one of the other witnesses. It might be of interest to know that, making car materials like seat foams for instance, the Ford Mustang, probably the most, quote unquote, manly car that's been produced over the last 25 years. The last 15 years, seats in the Ford Mustang have been made from soy. The side panels have been made from hemp. Roof materials have been made from flax. So what's happening in terms of that transition, it's helping to provide and build stronger domestic biomass supply chains for our farmers so that they can weather the economic uncertainty that happens and the trade disputes that happens. All of these have been brought up over the last hour that we've been talking.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cannings. Madam Seagrave. We'll now move to Mr. Mazie for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Speaker. Mr. Orb and Ms. Brownlee, I recall it when Manitoba proposed an environmental plan. It was called the Manitoba Green Plan. It was very detailed. It included carbon tax exemptions for farmers, which was very important to our agriculture sector, but it also included a focus on conservation through nature-based solutions. So it was a very good, robust plan. Unfortunately, despite the great work done throughout extensive consultations with Manitobans, Ottawa rejected the plan because it didn't align with their Ottawa knows best approach. How counterproductive is it when Ottawa overrules the local-based work of provinces? Mr. Orb, you can start.
Well, it's quite unfortunate, and I think something very similar happened here in Saskatchewan when our province put forward a plan to take place of the federally imposed carbon tax. We basically were told that we copied or tried to copy what New Brunswick had done, but the federal government had said, no, we don't accept that, even though it was accepted from another province. So it's very disconcerting, and I think it seems to us it's very political, and we even see this proposed bill as being political because we feel like fingers are being pointed at the prairie provinces, and in particular Saskatchewan, because we produce a lot of food, a lot of grain, a lot of pulse crops and things like that are produced. And we feel that the fingers are being pointed at farmers when farmers aren't the problem. It's we already showed how much they're doing towards sustainability and protecting our environment, yet we're not being rewarded for that. Instead, it seems like we're being penalized.
I guess that's 2 for 2 then, 2 provinces. Ms. Brownlee, do you have anything to add?
I certainly agree.
How counterproductive this is?
Very counterproductive, and I agree with Mr. Orb. As a province, Alberta has been on the leading edge of technology and formulating the most effective programs to combat climate change while nurturing essential economies. Adding red tape to our efforts would only injure the prairies and have a crippling effect on the world.
MP Carr stated in the last meeting, and I quote, "We've failed continuously to aligning our political interests to the real interests of prairie folk," end quote. But now we are studying this bill, and he wants even more to give more power to the political interests in Ottawa. Do you think that the political interests in Ottawa of this bill align with the interests of prairie folk? And I can start with, I guess, Ms. Nez.
No, we do not.
And why?
I feel that, especially for the oil and gas industry, we're constantly under scrutiny, and it's getting tiring. So we need to be able to run our industry and do what we do best.
Excellent. Anybody else got anything to add? Ms. Brownlee?
No, I agree. Concur.
Mr. Bewick, we haven't heard anything out of you for a while.
As I indicated, we want to see support and we want to see the federal government that's proud of how remarkable our energy sector is, how completely valuable it is to the rest of the world more than ever, and that it can be helping with energy security in Europe and helping with carbon emissions in Asia, and we should be supporting it and increasing it, not finding ways to transition away from it.
If a piece of legislation that only impacts the prairie provinces does not have the support from any of the provincial governments, do you think Parliament should pass it? And I'll go through Justin, or Ms. Ness. Ms. Brownlee?
No, agreed.
Mr. Orb?
No, I don't believe so.
Mr. Bewick?
No, I don't believe so either.
Thank you. And do you think, in Manitoba, do you believe that the prairie provinces can actually build their own green economy without interference from Ottawa?
We already are.
Can you expand on that?
We have policy and procedure in place for, if you go to the tank terminals, you can eat a sandwich off of a pipeline. It's clean. We take pride in our terminals and our pipelines. We take care of them. It's our infrastructure.
Ms. Brownlee?
Yes, agreed. As per my first 5 minutes, I explained all the stats on exactly what we've already been doing and far exceeding all goals.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to Mr. Fillmore for 5 minutes.
Everybody was agree with you.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. And thanks also to the witnesses. We know how valuable all of your time is, and we thank you very much for making time for us today. Mr. Sohi, I'm going to direct a couple of questions at you, but I just want to start with two quick points. And the first one is it's just a thought about who we compare ourselves to. And yes, Canadian oil is cleaner than other oil, but being less bad than Saudi Arabia isn't good. It's just less bad. I think it's more instructive to compare ourselves to countries in the world that are leading in green and clean energy, like Iceland and Denmark and Scotland and so on. I think it's just a smarter comparison for us to make in these times that we live in. And the other one was Nate's actually from central Canada, not from the east, Mr. Steinley. I'm from the east. And I can tell you that it's a part of the world where, fishers and coal miners have had to retrain. In the former case of fishery, it was the resource itself that collapsed. It wasn't government regulation. And of course, the case of the latter, it was the economic viability of the extraction no longer held. So those workers retooled, and now they're providing for their families and contributing to community in all kinds of productive and fulfilling ways. And we live in an era where there's so much work to do. We have to build 1 million houses in Canada, perhaps that many. We have to build important green energy infrastructure. I just learned today, in fact, about the Kavalik hydro fiber link in Manitoba to decarbonize the north by getting it off diesel. That's a major infrastructure project that's going to need people who understand energy infrastructure. So I just wanted to make those 2 points. But Mr. Sohi, two questions really. The first one is just a very broad one. What do you believe is the gravest economic threat facing the prairie provinces today?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to make sure that you know that MP Carr did consult with me before the introduction of this legislation, and we wanted to have municipal voices included. So I'm kind of disappointed that is not part of the Clause 2. So also very proud, as many of you know, my work on the Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion Project that will allow Alberta oil to be used throughout North America as well as beyond North America. I'm the only person, I think, among this group that have demonstrated my commitment to the oil and gas sector by actually doing something for the oil and gas sector. And I believe that Canada should not be buying oil from anywhere else. We should be using our own oil. So I firmly believe on those. But as we transition to other renewable energy sources, climate change is a serious risk for prairie provinces. We are seeing more droughts in our communities. We are seeing heat waves in our communities. We are are required to invest billions of dollars to upgrade the existing infrastructure so we can remain resilient to the impacts of climate change. And there are solutions out in the prairie provinces that needs to be supported. For example, hydrogen offers such a considerable amount of potential for thousands and thousands of jobs for hardworking Albertans. At the same time, help us reduce emissions locally and also offer global solution to climate change. LNG is another huge potential that we have in prairie provinces. That should be supported by the federal government. Carbon capture, storage, utilization, sequestration. Yes, in the last budget, federal government made some changes, but we need to expand on those changes that we can support the growth in the economy of Alberta and diversify. I don't think we're far apart. I agree with some of my other colleagues from Alberta that oil and gas will remain a big part of Canada's economy and Canada's energy, but we also need to diversify those sources that we are able to stand the impact of climate change and make our communities more greener. So it's not one against the other. It's more of each source of energy complementing and helping grow our economy and create jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Sohi. And do you, when we think about all that the prairie provinces provide to Canada and the rest of the world, whether it's energy or food or other projects resulting from manufacture, how do you feel the elements of the bill would improve the prairie provinces' ability to provide those things to the rest of the country and the world?
Well, the way I see the bill, it's not about against oil and gas. It's about diversification and supporting communities' transition. There are a large number of communities that have been impacted by the transition of coal-fired electricity generation, and those communities are struggling, and those are rural communities, and they need to be supported. And such a bill needs to be in place that provide them that necessary support. Actually, hold Ottawa to account. If Ottawa is going to come into municipalities and impose policies that help us meet our global targets, absolutely, which I support, but there has to be a correspondent matching support for municipalities and communities to be sustainable and vibrant. That's why I see the potential of this bill, that it allows us as municipalities to hold Ottawa accountable on its responsibility to support municipalities as we transition and give us the necessary support.
Thank you, Mr. Sohi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sohi. Mr. Fillmore will now move to MP Cram for 5 minutes.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. My questions will be for Mr. Ray Orb from the Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities. So, Mr. Orb, we're in a difficult situation here in that this particular bill applies to Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba only, but it will be voted on by members of Parliament from all across the country. So I was wondering if you could give the parliamentarians here in Ottawa an idea of what does the oil and gas sector mean to the economy and the way of life of the people of Saskatchewan?
Well, the oil and gas sector, I think it's really integral to the economic welfare of a lot of rural communities because, of course, the rural municipalities in our province would be home to every pipeline that we have in this province. So linear taxation is very important. Rural municipalities receive a lot of their taxation funding from these pipelines. So the jobs that are related with them, many of the people that are working in the rural communities are living on farms. Some of them are farmers themselves. It's not out of the ordinary to have farmers that are oil and gas workers as well. So there's I think, a strong economic tie. And really, I think when things happen outside of our country, around the world, when we see that Canada is not able to get our oil and gas or natural gas, LNG, or whatever the case may be, I think it's disconcerting. And I think the federal government needs to pay attention to that. I would say that more than private member's bill, we need to have a good discussion in our country about energy, and that's all forms of energy. That's renewables, small modular reactors, nuclear power, nuclear energy is important, but so is oil and gas, and I think we have to remember all of those.
Now, this bill is not the first time the federal Liberal government has waded into the debate about oil and gas in Western Canada. We've had Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines bill. We've had Bill C-48, the West Coast oil tanker ban. And of course, we've had the ever-increasing carbon tax. So I was wondering, Mr. Orb, if you could comment on the effects of these policies on Saskatchewan.
Well, the Environmental Impact Assessment Act, I think that's a bill that you're referring to, Bill C-69, does have implications for rural municipalities and our rural economy. And part of that is actually the Navigable Waters Act that SARM was really concerned about the federal government making a new bill, bringing some amendments in that would affect how municipalities do business from day to day. And it has to do with transportation on rivers and streams, being able to build bridges in some places that it would be very expensive to do that because of the bureaucratic red tape that was created by that bill. So that's a big concern to us as well. The tanker ban moratorium, C-48, was something that we're concerned about because we saw that it was taking away from our Western transportation system for the movement of oil. And just to, I mean, we're satisfying part of our country, but we're hurting another part of our country. We had a big concern about that as well. And we testified on a few occasions that we were opposed to that act. The carbon tax is something that we have been working with our province to try and figure out how we could come up with something that would appease Ottawa. It's something that hurts our farmers right now. Even as far as trying to convince the federal government that we need rebates for grain drying, propane and especially, and we still haven't seen any meaningful action on that file. So I think that's something that hurts agriculture because it puts our farmers in Saskatchewan at a disadvantage compared even to our American farmers who are our competitors. And it's really unfair that the federal government is not acting sooner on some kind of a rebate plan.
And in the time I have left, would you be able to share with the committee some of the highlights of the good environmentally beneficial projects and activities that have been going on in Saskatchewan independently of federal government interference?
Well, maybe one example that I just made reference to was small modular reactors, SMRs, something that our province, in particular Sask Power, and SARM, we've been, sort of partnering, I would say, on the initial consultations for that. Ottawa is not directly involved in it, although I understand that Ottawa does support the concept of being able to do that. But we're really in this province, I think we're leading the way. New Brunswick, some of the other provinces, Ontario, and I think just recently Alberta signed on to a kind of a MOU to work together on those. But creating nuclear power, I think, is very important. Number one, we need to be able to share electricity a lot more efficiently and things like that with other provinces. But I think that's one good example. The other one I did mention was the Saskatchewan Soil Conservation Association project that we partnered with this organization to show that farmers are sequestering carbon. And we're taking a lot of carbon on the atmosphere, but we're not able to convince the federal government that farmers should be qualified for offsets or carbon credits because the federal government says it's business as usual. It's nothing new, but farmers are developing and adapting new technology all of the time, and we still can't seem to get the credit for it.
Beaucoup, Monsieur Orb. Je passerai la parole à Madame.
Thank you, Mr. Orb. And Ms. Lapointe, you have 5 minutes. Inaudible. Microphone, please.
Is the microphone working now?
I'm innocent. There we go.
All right. My questions are for Ms. Seagrave. My understanding is that your organization provides critical strategic investment advice and services to business developers of clean, green, and sustainable technologies. So I want to ask, in your opinion, what are the biggest hurdles faced by new enterprises entering the clean energy sector? And the second part of my question is, and can you tell us how Bill C-235 will have a positive effect in addressing those challenges?
Thanks so much. Great question. The challenges are mostly around policy alignment, investment, critical investment that is also patient capital and experienced capital for this type of sector and the build out of this sector. Most of these types of projects require long-term significant capex. We don't have the investment backing in Canada that they do in the US or frankly in the EU to mitigate some of these hurdles. And as I mentioned before, even the introduction of the Inflation Reduction Act, the climate smart commodities investments in the US, and the boost global competitiveness investments in the US are all basically attracting talent, companies, and technologies away from Canada because we don't have the same types of investment mechanisms here. With regards to the framework that's been developed, I think it's just a starting point. It's foundational. And I think it will help spur that private capital because industry will know that greening, clean tech, clean, green, sustainable technologies are going to be a priority for the government, and it will provide an opportunity to partner with the government and follow along because their investments will be considered secure. So I think it's just a starting point. I don't think it's the end-all be-all, and given the conversation today, I think there's a lot of amendments that could happen to make some of the other witnesses a little bit more acceptable to it.
Thanks. And you also work with emerging companies that are commercializing technology, which supports the transition towards a net zero carbon economy. Now, we know that's a challenge faced in other sectors. How would this bill help innovators and researchers in commercializing?
I don't think it's going to directly impact them in terms of commercializing, but again, if government is acting as a leader, then industry in a lot of cases will follow, and they definitely follow with regards to investment. So spurring that private capital is exactly what's going to be needed to help build out these companies and help them get over those commercialization hurdles. Again, government taking the lead will also have an impact on what's happening in our research institutions, provincial, federal, academic, across the board. If we've got a leadership role that's being taken, those institutions tend to follow, and the money tends to follow. So the research money tends to follow, which is also going to help those companies overcome commercialization hurdles.
Mm-hmm. And just touching upon your previous comment about some of the feedback that we heard today from the witnesses, I just want to remind the committee members that when we had MP here, Jim Carr, at the last meeting, he talked about the bill giving an explicit mandate and instructions to build a framework of consultation. And those directions were being given to the Minister of Industry in consultation with the Ministers of Natural Resources, Finance, and Environment. I have one more final question for you, and that is, in your opinion, what ways could this bill affect the Canadian agricultural industry as a whole?
Great question, and I would go back to something that Mr. Orb brought up. Our farmers are stewards of the land that we have here in Canada, and we need to remember that building out those strong domestic biomass-based industries will actually help protect our farmers from those economic uncertainties. So if we are moving towards clean, green, and sustainable technologies, most of them are going to be bio-based and biomass-based as a starting point. So that's agriculture, forestry, and frankly, even our fisheries sectors as well.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Pointe. Monsieur Lemire pour 2 minutes 30.
Mr. Lemire, 2.5 minutes. My question is for Mrs. Ness. In your opening statement, you said that wind and solar energy needed the oil sector. Did I understand you correctly? And if that is the case, why?
So green energy still needs the oil and gas sector. What do you think lubricates your wind energy?
Mais en quoi mon véhicule...
But why does my electric car need oil in order to go? Solar panel, does it need oil to function? And the same thing with the wind turbine?
So your wind turbines do and your electric cars do because you have moving parts that need to be lubricated, right, by oil. So you still need oil and gas.
Parfait. C'était en ce sens-là, je voulais entendre.
Are you comfortable with the fact that your taxes and mine and that of all Quebecers and Canadians have been used to buy oil pipeline by the government rather than through the private sector? Don't you think that the oil and gas sector should be dealing with these risks?
Sorry, I kind of caught parts of that. I'm trying to listen here, and then I have you here. Can you say that again, please?
The purchase of Kinder Morgan by the Government of Canada is problematic because it was done by the government and not by the private sector. Is it up to the government to take the risks with the money of Quebecers and Canadians, take financial risk in order to purchase a pipeline?
The pipeline should have never been purchased by the federal government. It should have stayed in the private sector. So, yeah.
À partir de maintenant...
As of now, what do? Do we sell it and reinvest this money? Would you be in agreement if we would put it into a fund that would be used for SME firms in Alberta or in the prairies?
I think that question should be directed back to Justin Trudeau and see what he thinks.
On lui a...
Do I have any time remaining? You have 7 seconds. So I'm going to take advantage of your generosity. In the bill, we talk in 3C, we say that nuclear energy would be considered as well. Are you in favor of the development of nuclear energy in the prairies?
I'm in favor of all industry, so why not?
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Si, Monsieur Lemire, Monsieur Cannings.
Well, thank you, and I'm going to go back to Mr. Sohi to come back to comments you made, Mr. Sohi, in your opening remarks about buildings and, much of our greenhouse gas emissions, much of those that carbon output that we're trying to cut down on comes from cities and municipalities, comes from buildings really, and to some extent obviously from transport. But I've heard estimates of up to 40% of our carbon footprint comes from buildings, both in the construction and the lighting and heating and cooling. And you mentioned the task that we have to retrofit those buildings. We basically have a huge task if we want to meet our targets to make our buildings as energy efficient as possible. And that means not just, retrofit programs for homes, but for apartment buildings, condos, industrial buildings. So I have kind of two questions here. One is, how are we going to incentivize this financially, because it's going to be a big job? And two, what would the impact of this be on the prairies? And this would be going on in every community in the prairies, even small communities in Saskatchewan, and Edmonton and Calgary and Winnipeg and Saskatoon, etc.
Yeah.
What would that impact be on the availability of employment in the prairies and across Canada?
Yeah. So the reason I'm here is that if this bill is going to go ahead, please do include municipalities in this. in the consultation because it's so critical that in order to achieve the objectives, municipalities needs to be at the table. Prairie municipalities, because this relates to prairie provinces. Uh, I think retrofitting existing buildings and repurposing them uh, help us achieve a number of objectives. First of all, it is a job creator. It end up creating thousands and thousands of jobs for tradespeople, right in the local communities where those buildings are being retrofitted. Second, we have a huge crisis of affordable housing in prairie provinces here in Edmonton, including. We have close to 70,000 Edmontonians who are in need of families who are in need of affordable housing, rental housing. So we can repurpose some of these buildings into more affordable rental buildings. Third component is help us reduce emissions. And so this is a win-win situation in many, many fronts. And not only small amount of emissions, but significant amount of emissions that will allow our communities to be net zero by 2050, which is the federal goal of doing so. So it's local jobs, more affordable housing, reduction in emissions, and it also helps spur innovation in the construction sector because as you give predictability and predictability to the construction industry that over time certain amount of resources from each order of government will be available. We can leverage those by working with the private sector to expand the work and gives that predictability over long term to foster innovation in the construction sector, and this is a win-win situation.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Sohi. Monsieur Cannings.
Thank you, Mr. Soy. Mrs. Stubbs, you have about 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would, of course, just note for the committee that when Mr. Carr, who I also respect greatly and respect and believe in his aspirations, was asked directly by an NDP colleague here when he testified whether or not he had consulted with any provincial or municipal representatives in the prairie provinces about this bill, about consulting prairie provinces. He said he did not in the development of that legislation. I also guess I would note for committee members talking about the investment in clean tech that, of course, 75% of clean tech investment in Canada comes from oil and gas companies, which is why we are cautioning about shutting down the industry, which is already happening under the last 7 years of this Liberal government, like the 18 LNG projects that have been cancelled while the U.S. is constructing them, like the 4 pipelines that have been lost, like the hundreds of thousands of jobs that have been lost, and the hundreds of millions of dollars of projects from the energy companies that are investing in and leading the entire Canadian economy in exactly the things that proponents say they care about, like clean and green tech and innovation. So it makes no sense whatsoever, of course, to cut that industry off at the knees when, in fact, it is the leader in that investment we say we value. Dr. Buick, just given that you sort of got into a bit of a debate with my independent-minded Liberal colleague Nathaniel Erskine-Smith, who I also respect and enjoy, but I would note that it perhaps epitomized what does happen to prairie representatives when they're trying to have a conversation with this Liberal government that just tells you what you ought to think and what you do and don't know on your own expertise. So I would just invite you to use some time to address the question I had asked you about any other clauses or aspects of the bills that you wanted to discuss, or if there was an answer that you wanted to give to our colleague in that round of questioning to expand on.
No, that's fine. I will note one more fun fact. There was 25 million trees planted by the major energy producers over the 8 years there. So I think, which brings me to, I think you were asking about some of the other clauses in the bill. And one of them does specifically talk about tree planting, and I feel like the industry minister must have many, many files that are very urgent and important and take up the ministry's attention. And I don't think tree planting should be one of them because, good news, Alberta is planting a whole lot of trees all on our own without a new department needed to track how many trees are being planted from the industry ministry, I'm sure there's another one in the environment ministry as well. But there are a few good clauses in here. The 3F talks about preparing infrastructure projects that facilitate adaptation to climate change and mitigation. I think that's something that the government should focus more on. It's kind of like maintaining infrastructure. It's not very fun. I guess in this one you would get to cut a ribbon, but it's something that tends to go by the wayside, and it costs us all in the long term. But those are, again, things that should be happening all over the country, I would hope. The other one is integrating clean energy into agriculture, forestry, transportation, manufacturing. This is worth doing, and it is happening at a considerable rate. And so some of the concern I have with this bill generally is if we needed the government to pay attention to these things, this might be worth the added red tape and forcing the minister and all of his department to come up with reports reporting in on progress. But I feel like integrating clean energy into agriculture, forestry, transportation, and the energy sector is one of the biggest concerns that this government has. And so I really feel like this is redundant to add more and more reports on things that are already happening, sometimes quite aggressively. But when it comes to, yes, I mentioned the tree planting, management of the boreal forest. The boreal forest is one of the world's largest carbon sinks. The oil sands covers, it's a fairly big operation, obviously, but it's 0.02% of the boreal forest. And all the companies that are working there have strict legal requirements to reclaim that land. And so I don't know, again, what more reports on how we're managing the boreal forest from the industry ministry on top of all the other ministries that are surely tracking that, as well as all the companies and the province of Alberta, who is legally binding them to reclaim those forests. And then the first clause, 3A, is concern about the non-existent transportation options in small cities and communities. The reason there aren't a lot of transportation options in small communities is because there isn't much demand for them. And I really worry about big federal government plans to somehow develop transportation options in small towns. I'm quite confident that things like autonomous vehicles or even Uber is already starting to fill that void in a lot of communities. And I really would prefer the private sector meet the demands there instead of large, expensive programs that take away from other priorities. And then the biggest concern, as I said and focused on earlier, is 3B, which is talking about retraining traditional energy industries. Once again, someone earlier talked about the need to transition to the transition is causing a demand for things like rare minerals. Yes, everybody wants to have some more electric batteries for all kinds of purposes, and they are very intensive on minerals, and of course that's an energy intensive operation to do mining. And the prairies in Ontario are great places where that should be a new industry, a new source of energy, and it's more about energy diversification and supporting all the kinds of energy that Canada can produce for the world, and not doing it at the expense of and with an eye to shutting down the one that makes us the most money and the one that the world needs the most right now.
On those words, Mr. Bewick, we'll have to end this committee meeting. I want to thank all of our witnesses for taking the time today. Much appreciated. Colleagues, have a great constituency week. Safe travels. Thank you to the analysts, the clerk, the translators. Merci à tous. Alors, cette rencontre est à jour.
This meeting is adjourned.